to the Commons said that the current law was outdated, but those against the bill, or it could lead to a slippery slope. It comes as several charities have warned end-of-life care must first be fixed before legislation on assisted dying is introduced, as our health correspondent Ashish Joshi reports.
Terminally ill adults end-of-life bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 29th of November.
Friday the 29th of November.
An historic moment that could lead to one of the most significant changes in British society. Assisted dying is a hugely contentious and emotive issue that polarises opinion. Its opponents are fearful about the slippery slope of an ever-widening criteria. But the MP who introduced the bill told me safeguards will be in place.
The first criteria is this is about terminally ill people. It's not about people who are going to get better. My proposal would probably be, and this is to be finalised in the coming weeks, 2 medical professions would have to sign this off. It will then have to go to a judge. So there's layers of safeguards and protections along the way.
Kim Leadbeater accepts there are valid concerns about a hospice sector in crisis and a broken palliative care system.
Hey, Tim.
Tim was given just a few months to live. That was 3.5 years ago.
Tim.
Born with learning disabilities, he later developed cancer, and it kept returning.
Be there. Hello, Tim. It's lovely to see you.
But despite being very sick, Tim can live at home with mum Valerie because of support from his palliative care nurse, Phoebe.
This is Joe. It's really sad to see him deteriorate, particularly because when I first started seeing him, you know, he was independently mobile in his wheelchair. He would take lots of videos. He'd be super, super chatty. I'm not going to lie, I do cry quite a lot at work. Yeah, I think you're a human.
Which flavour would you like?
Valerie is 82, and naturally, she's worried about the future. Would you be able to cope without the palliative care you receive?
I couldn't do this without them. I could ring St Christopher's at any time, and they keep such wonderful notes so that whoever answers the phone knows everything.
St Christopher's Hospice neither supports or opposes a change in the law, but the hospice sector is a strong and important voice in that debate. Linda has experienced the best and worst of end-of-life care. Her mother died peacefully and comfortably at a Marie Curie hospice, but her Aunt Mary chose to die at home.
We had to buy her incontinence pads, we had to buy different creams because the deliveries weren't regular. We had to chase everyone for everything. And it's just so tiring all the time having to fight.
In the UK, we don't talk about death enough. But now, that conversation is being forced on us. And it could be one of the most important ones we ever have in our lives. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Well, my next guest tonight is calling for a change in the assisted dying law. This is after her husband ended his life at Dignitas earlier this year. Lottie Clark watched as her fit and healthy 42-year-old husband, James, deteriorated after being diagnosed with motor neurone disease. After 2 years with MND, he chose to travel to Zurich to end his life. And in his last call to his wife, James made one final request, asking Lottie to do all that she could to get the UK to reconsider their stance on assisted dying. I sat down with her a little earlier today and I started by asking Lottie what it was like when James received his diagnosis.
So the diagnosis took a very long period of time, over several months, and the first set of tests he had came back as unremarkable. And he walked into the first neurologist's office and was told by him that he categorically didn't have MND. They were the neurologist's words to him. So he felt reassured by that. And as the symptoms progressed and continued, he pushed hard because James needed an answer for everything. That was the kind of person he was. And he called me and he said, I've just come out of the neurologist's office and I've got motor neuron disease. And I said, what do you mean? You can't have, you know... no one gets motor neuron disease. And he said, I've got it lots. And I said, OK, well, just get on a train home. It'll be fine. We'll talk about it. We'll sort it. We always sort things. It'll be OK. Sadly, it wasn't OK, but yeah.
When did the subject of assisted dying come up between you and James?
That day when he called me on the train home and he said, I need you to know that I'm not going to see this through to the end. I'll fight for you and I'll fight for our kids, but I can't see it through to the end. And I've approached Dignitas about going to Switzerland.
Because he told you in the January of this year that he had a date.
Yeah.
He had booked an appointment at Dignitas.
Yeah.
And that was the plan.
Yeah.
So you had from January to April to work through that as a family and make as many memories as you could. What was it like to have a time frame, to have a date when you would no longer have your husband, have your children's father?
So right from the off, we had ignored. There is no. There's very little hope for M&D. So it's not like you can turn up for a hospital appointment and be given some drugs that may or may not help, or be given anything. So in the end, we just decided that we would actually not go to any of those hospital appointments. We did them virtually, and it got to the point where James said it's just ridiculous. They're just asking me to how high I can lift my arms, which I can't do. I can't even talk to them anymore. I can't, and it was really upsetting just going into these neurological departments, having to go through this. And at that point, this was probably a few months after his diagnosis, he had sat in his office and he'd written cards and letters to the kids up until, you know, their 21st birthdays for their weddings. He'd set about his affairs. He'd voice banked his voice. And then he'd stepped back from the role, the job that he absolutely loved and was a huge part of the person he was. And at that point, I said, look, we can either sit around and wallow, or we can pick ourselves up and we can actually set about making some memories whilst you can, and we can jump on a plane, because we're lucky enough to be able to do that, and you can find another project. So he started fundraising, and he attacked that with, well, it's just incredible watching him do that, and that was his passion then. And in the end, he raised over £1 million for My Name's Doddy into research for motor neuron disease. And in that time, we travelled. The travelling became harder the weaker he became. So we lived this journey with him. His body declined, but it wasn't a shock to us. It wasn't like he left for work one morning and had an accident and came back changed. We changed with him. So by the time he'd booked that date in January, he decided over Christmas and hadn't told me. And at that point, I needed a few weeks to be able to understand what that meant and how the end really was there. And we were approaching that, and we, at that point, wanted to tell the children. And so we did, and our narrative to Matilda was very different. She's our little one, who was 7 at the time, to the other two, but we were very honest and open with the other two. It was nothing to be ashamed of. And I think they, you know, if you ask them about it now, they're like, how brave. You know, he's amazing that he did that.
For your husband to have to go to another country to end his own life without his loved ones around him, what was that like? Because that's a big issue for people. They want to end their own life, but they want to do it, not only in the way they're choosing, but surrounded by those they love.
Yeah, yeah. I think for him, by the point that he was ready to leave, he was very, very frail. So I was then his sole carer. And I think he had made his peace with that. And he understood that the option wasn't available to him in the UK. And he would have to go there. And that meant not being with his family. But I think his pain and anguish and his physical pain was greater than the pain of losing us and us not being with him. You know, he'd had 2.5 years to get used to that. Not that that made it any easier when the day came, but yeah, I think he'd made his peace with it by that point.
Had you, at that point, had the children?
I don't think I will ever. I've made my peace with the fact that he did what was right for him, what was right for us, what was right for our situation and his suffering. I will never make my peace with the fact that he had to get on a plane and not be with us. And also that I think it ironically cut short some final weeks that we could have had together if he hadn't have had to travel. But he was at the point where he wouldn't have been able to physically travel if he'd left it
He
much
had to go
later.
before he was
Yeah, he
ready.
did. Yeah, he did.
So he could physically make
Yeah.
that journey on his own.
Yeah.
Planning your own death, you get to make plans for your final weeks and months, also for life after you've left your family. You get to have the conversations that people say they wish they'd had they known someone was going to pass. You get to tell people your wishes, your husband's being that you tell his story. You get to let people know that they're loved.
Yeah.
What was it like to have that opportunity? Because changing the law in the UK would provide that opportunity for people to have that set plan, that dignified death, and that way of not just ending it how you want to as an individual, but as a family.
I think it's really important. I think, you know, if you were to look at I hate to say the upside of a terminal illness, because of course, how can there be? But if you were to compare that versus a shock death, then we were lucky because we were able to spend that time and to say our goodbyes and to leave no stone unturned. But I still grapple with the fact that I wasn't with him to hold his hand. And even though we managed to FaceTime when he was out in Zurich, when he got to the clinic, that was the final FaceTime. I wasn't able to lie next to him, hold his hand, you know, and that's losing somebody and the grief that comes with that, particularly at a young age when it's unexpected, you know, in your 40s. The grief of that is huge, but then the added layer of grief, having to wave goodbye to him and see him do that alone is, I think an unnecessary trauma that my children have had to live through, and I have too.
Lottie, what would you say to those who are against an assisted dying bill? They say it could be open to abuse. There are people that say, you know, palliative care in this country needs to get better to help people with end-of-life caring. This shouldn't be seen as an easy or a cheaper option, just to put it in those, you know, bald terms, because that's what some people are saying when it comes to this. For families like you, it was something that worked, but people don't quite understand that you can't just go to Dignitas. It is a process.
Yeah.
There are checks. Is that what you would counter those arguments with? This isn't something that is by any means taken lightly by anyone involved.
No. And I can only speak from personal experience, but I do understand. I understand their fears, but I think if we were the first country to enter into this, then yes, of course, there should be huge amounts of concern, but this has happened in other countries for many, many years, and it's happened successfully without, you know, without cause for alarm. And I think that of course the right safeguards need to be put in place, and that will be discussed, and it will, you know, those safeguards will be there and they will be implemented. I mean, James didn't just hop on a plane and go to Switzerland. It was, although I wasn't involved in the process, legally he wanted to keep me aside from all of the bureaucratic side of things. But there were psychiatric reports that had to be put in every 6 months. He had to see I think a notary public at one point. You know, it's not something that people say, yes, I've had enough, I want to go and do it. Those safeguarding procedures are there, and for the right reason.
Lottie, how are you and your children remember James? I know that, as we've discussed, you had the opportunity to have conversations with him and talk about life as a family now and after he left you.
Yeah.
How do you all remember James now? How do you keep him alive within the family unit?
I think the mind is a wonderful object, isn't it? He used to say to me, please don't remember me like this. Please don't remember, you know, just caring for me. And I'd think at the time, I can't ever imagine thinking, you know, remembering you any other way. And yet now, all of that has been blanked. And I remember him as the young, fun, fit, dad, you know, throwing the kids up in the air, kicking a football, carrying bikes and scooters and dogs, and that's the way I remember him. And I think, you know, the children remember that too.
Well, a huge thank you to Lottie for sharing James's story, her family story with us here on the UK Tonight. As we saw outside Parliament today and throughout this campaign to legalise assisted dying, there is a lot of opposition. Religious organisations, those worried about vulnerable groups, disabled people and those with mental health issues, and people concerned about state intervention in something as fundamental as choosing how and when to die. They have all been expressing their views. Well, let's now get the views of Nims Abunge, pastor at Freedom's Ark Community Church in North London. Really good to have you on the programme this evening. Thank you so much. You were listening to James's story there, as told so eloquently by his wife, Lottie. Still, you know, this is still so fresh for her. James only passed in April. What did you make of what her family went through? This was a conscious decision that James made, and he wasn't afforded the opportunity to see that through with his family in this country.
Thanks for having me on your program. I feel the trauma. I've been at the bedside of many members of my church who have had to hold their hands till they let go of life at a hospital. And so it's a difficult, very difficult position to be in. But it also makes me remember my brother who had terminal cancer and was at London Teaching Hospital at Gower Street and was told he had 6 months left to live. His face had been contorted by the cancer. And I remember the doctors told my mom, your son's going to die. And my mom said, my son will not die. My brother was doing law at LSE at the time and was only in his 20s. So that was a very difficult moment for my parents and for us as a family. Immediate senior brother there. Now, we got to the point where he had gone through chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and was just on palliative care, on morphine, just waiting for him to die here in England. We lived in Cricklewood. And so I believe the sanctity, life is a gift from God. I can't. And something special happened in my family. Very unique. It doesn't happen in every family. But we had something really special when somebody came to our home and prayed for my brother. And that was something that never had happened before. The pain that he had go riveting through his body because his cancer had eaten up his lungs, his bloodstream. He slept through the night, and for the first time ever since the cancer had come in. And eventually, less than 1 month, 2 months to his life, he actually ended up going to a Bible college, really unique. And all this evidence is in Teaching Hospital on Gower Street. And they prayed for him out of this country. And my brother lived and is still alive. And they don't know how the cancer disappeared, but it doesn't happen to everybody. So that is a gift.
Nims, that's very true. And you're a man of faith. And I know that faith comes into this debate because people who have faith do not believe that assisted dying should be legalised. But I would put it to you that those who have faith, if this were to become legal, they would not be the people trying to take this option. It's the people who do not look at this in terms of faith, they look at it in terms of the practicalities of life. And you think about those kind of diseases where there is no way out. Motor neurone disease, you're never going to get better. You're only going to get worse. And for those people to have the choice to end their life how they want to, can you understand that? I do get from a religious viewpoint that is a non-starter, but can you understand for those who don't hold your beliefs that this should be an option that's available to them?
I certainly do, but I think that let's move from my brother's personal scenario, which was not just because of man of faith, but it's just a miracle that happened in our family, to the reality that we have a failing health system. The NHS has failed significant members of the Black minority ethnic community, and we know it's overburdened. And to have this as a law in this land, there are significant concerns within the Black minority ethnic communities that already feel that we're losing too many people in the fact that health services have not, there's been an inequality of health care for our community, and to find this as an option, many would be tempted to push, and that's a vulnerability our community feel, encourage folks to take this up.
Nims, I get that, because Kim Leadbeater, who has brought this bill to Parliament for debate in the hope of getting this legislation passed, said that there will be checks and safeguarding. And that was touched on in my interview with Lottie. And I can see you shaking your head there, and I understand that, because let's face it, the NHS doesn't always get it right. There are checks and safeguarding in so many areas of the health service, and things go wrong. Things aren't always adhered to. You know, when it comes to this, checks and safeguarding don't always work. So is that the real concern here, that it could just be like any other part of the healthcare system? Things can go wrong.
Absolutely. COVID, we saw what happened with COVID. I wrote an article on the issues of the impact of COVID within the Black minority ethnic communities, and it was very significant. Things do go wrong, and it's not can go wrong, they do go wrong. And I feel that, you know, in allowing a bill like this, I'm not particularly going on the slippery slope debate, and there is a conversation to be had on that. And I think that for many within our community, trying to transition that conversation and also the cultural dimensions of this, issues around feelings within the health care system, the issues around compassion. Compassion exists as a result of suffering. And when we try to shorten life in order to say you don't, part of our compassion is taking away your life, or dying too soon. I think the family should be allowed to journey with their loved ones and, acknowledge that without this, I'm not encouraging pain, but I'm saying in the midst of the pain, let's remember the compassion that we bring as communities, as families. We shouldn't lose that.
Yeah.
Trying to pass a bill. In Canada, you already have 4% of deaths through this, a bill like this. We don't want to see that in this country.
Well, Nims, it's really good to talk to you, and I think you touched on some really good points there, and particularly, you talk about palliative care and being with someone at the end of their life. There has been a huge movement today, an argument that if palliative care was better in the UK, then would this even be such a big discussion? Nims Abungate, really good to hear from you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your point of view.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Well, it's nearly a decade since an assisted dying bill was last debated in Parliament. Then David Cameron's coalition government opposed changing the law, but this time round, MPs are going to be given a free vote. And Lord Cameron has been telling my colleague Kay Burley he's now prepared to listen to both sides.
Over the years of watching this debate and listening to the passionate arguments that people have put forward, having also known people with things like motor neurone disease and seen the deterioration and know how awful the end can be, I've got an open mind and I'm thinking.
And you can see Kay's interview in full with Lord Cameron on Sky News Breakfast tomorrow morning from 7 a.m. NHS staff in England will now be able to report colleagues for sexual harassment anonymously, with health service bosses warning inappropriate behaviour will not be tolerated. It comes after a Sky News investigation uncovered widespread allegations of harassment and assault against female paramedics. Just to warn you that this report from Sky's Rachel Venables does contain details of sexual harassment and suicide from the start.
He just put his hand straight down my top. I was like, in shock. I couldn't move. I didn't know how to react. I just froze, absolutely froze.
All she ever wanted at work was to help save lives. But as a paramedic, Freya says she suffered relentless sexual harassment from colleagues. Then, after being locked in the back of an ambulance and assaulted, she tried to take her own life.
I have scars, mentally and physically, and I had the career I so loved stolen from me. And I'm lonely. I'm on my own because I can't trust anyone.
All year, Sky News has been investigating sexual misconduct in the ambulance service. But NHS bosses say the problem exists right across the health service, and they're determined to tackle it with new policies and training, and with staff now able to anonymously report their colleagues for inappropriate behaviour.
I really hope that all of the measures that we have announced today gives people confidence that we are taking these awful behaviours and assaults seriously, and that we want people to come forward. They will be supported, they will be believed, and they will be heard.
For campaigners, it's a move in the right direction.
I think that there is definitely a culture of tolerance of these behaviours and attitudes within the NHS. I know from my own personal experience of trying to raise complaints that it can be really difficult.
The true scale of sexual harassment and abuse in the NHS is only just beginning to be understood. But as more people feel able, by any means, to speak up, it's hoped real and cultural change can begin. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
If you're affected by any of the issues raised there in Rachel's report, help is available from the Samaritans 24 hours a day. Call 116 123, or you can email Samaritans, joe@samaritans.org. Still to come on the programme, we'll speak to a campaigner trying to get more disabled people into work. This is after a government report said too many are being written off by employers. And the woman at the heart of one of the world's longest-running and most captivating catfish cases joins me in the studio.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news. This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. It's legal to let go. Set the speed and take the hands off. It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hands is a highly trained police dog. The force is incredible. It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid. And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
A government report has found young disabled people are facing continuous barriers to securing long-term employment, with many of them being written off and told they can never succeed. The House of Lords Public Services Committee said young people with additional needs were fully capable of thriving in work with the appropriate support. But the report found employers are frequently unwilling or feel unable to bring disabled people into the workplace. Well, let's speak now to Harry Georgiou, a disability activist who also works for DFN Project Search, which helps young people with learning difficulties and autism transition into the workplace. Really good to see you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on to the programme. This report lays it bare, doesn't it? The reality of young disabled people who go through education, are looking for a job, a career, and there's that gap in getting them into the workplace. Talk to me about some of the people that you have helped and what they've been experiencing, what the government has identified here.
So one of the main things for transitioning into work is that definitely the right support. And time and time again, we see the right support in place. And when the right support is in place, it works. When the right support is not in place, that's when it fails. And the right support is and can be a supported alternative, which is what we offer at DFN Palliative Sets. And when that right support is in place, it can work. But there are also other barriers into work, such as direct communication for disabled young adults, and finding the right funding for continuous long-term employment. And that could be through other means. And it also could just be that as well, that they are just written off, that they get told at a very young age, you won't receive to this, you won't receive to that. And when you get told that for 20 odd years, 18 years, you really start to believe it. And so your self-confidence goes down, your mentality goes down, and all the other things that other people take for granted, disabled people sometimes don't get.
Harry, talk to me about what the right support is. I mean, number one, that is glaringly obvious from what you said is employers' attitudes. That has to change. That has to be the starting point. But when we talk about the right support for somebody with a disability in a workplace, what are we talking about here? Because the misconception is it's too expensive and it's too difficult.
So the right support is very person-centred, but the whole of the support can be funded for access to work. So actually, there's no cost to the employer itself. And by doing a supported internship, there's also no cost to the employer. And the supported internship is a 1-year academic programme where the young individuals or the young adults go into their host business and learn everything about the job. And by the end, they are ready to transition into work, into a fully paid job, paid the prevailing wage.
Harry, it's not all negative, is it? Because the report does highlight that there are a number of employers out there doing a great job to make the workplace inclusive for those with disabilities and special needs who need special support, one of which was highlighted was the National Health Service, a really inclusive employer that drives to bring differences into the workplace. Can you talk to us about some of the people who are doing it right, some of the organisations that are getting it right?
So absolutely, the National Health Service is definitely one of the employers that are doing it right. And Amazon is another massive employer that is doing it right. And there are so many other employers that, given the right opportunity, when they take on the supported internship, it changes the atmosphere of the employees and of the employer as well, because it actually opens their eyes to what is available. And people within the employer that has been employed for 20, maybe 30 years, they come out as being neurodiverse or have a disability because they feel more comfortable to ask for that right support as well.
Yeah. And just a final word, Harry, to anyone out there watching, because like you said, this attitude starts in the education system, you know, from nursery school age. Your capabilities and your opportunities are going to be limited. That's the sort of mindset it's in. So for those young people watching tonight, this report is out there and it's highlighted things you already know, but it's getting the attention of the wider society, the wider workplace. What would you say to young disabled people watching this evening?
What I say to young disabled people watching this evening is you are capable of everything. With the right support, you can achieve anything. And our slogan at the moment at DFN Palliative Sets is don't stop us now, because we are unstoppable with the right support.
Brilliant. Harry, you said it perfectly. Thank you so much. Harry Georgiou, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on the programme tonight. Thank you. Still to come on the UK Tonight, as a new Netflix series dramatises all the details, I'm going to speak to the real-life victim of the Sweet Bobby catfish ordeal. And Thomas Tuchel laughs off concerns about his nationality as he takes on one of the biggest jobs in world football. Now, my next guest this evening was the victim of one of the world's worst and most complex catfishing cases. Sweet Bobby was originally a podcast. It's now been turned into a Netflix documentary. It tells the story of Kirat Asi, who was deceived into believing that she was in an online relationship for 9 years with a cardiologist called Dr. Bobby Jandu. But nothing was what it seemed. Let's take a look at a clip from the documentary.
What happened to me is just one crazy story. You can't make it up. We're talking about 10 years of my life. I was 32, very focused on my career. All my friends are getting married, and I just felt, when's it going to be my turn? One day, I get a friend request from Bobby that changes my life.
Well, joining me in the studio is the real-life victim at the centre of the Sweet Bobby story, Kirat Asi. Kirat, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. I listened to the podcast documenting what you went through over a year ago now, and I was blown away by the complexity and the elaborate nature of what essentially was a scam. Talk to me about how elaborate this was, because you thought you were in a relationship with a man for 9 years.
Yeah. I think to clarify, that relationship for 9 years wasn't a romantic relationship. It was just, the man was, like, I learned who it was through family networks. So we had, we have close networks, and I worked out who it was. I'm like, oh, OK, that's so-and-so's so-and-so.
Because it was a real person, but their identity was taken by someone else.
Yeah.
And they contacted you online and built a rapport.
That's right, with the help of the real-life perpetrator as well. So to make it all real, and all these characters were people that I knew. We had mutual family, mutual contacts. It was fine. And it was quite gradual. It wasn't, I was in a relationship, that Bobby was in a relationship. So in our community, you very quickly bro-zone people when it's that kind of thing. And he called me Big Sis, eventually. But it was a very gradual process. And eventually, when he was very, very ill in 2015, when we thought he was going to pass away, he wanted to be in a relationship with me. He'd already told me he loved me a few months before, and I was just not having it. But it was like, OK, dying man's last wish. And then, this sounds awful, but then he didn't die. And then, you've established a relationship, and the trust and the respect was there, which was something I didn't have, even if you weren't sure about what the chemistry was going to be like. But then very soon after that, it started becoming abusive, the coercive, controlling, what I recognise as coercive and controlling in that relationship.
Wanting to know where you were and having you on the phone all the time. Because the big question is, how did you not know? But, you've answered a lot of that there. This was elaborate. This was an imposter impersonating someone else, setting up around 60 Facebook profiles to create an entire community of fake friends and family for you also to be in touch with online. I don't want to give away the spoiler to whoever, to people who don't know the story, but you do find out it's an imposter. It's not who you thought it was. What did that do to you? Because I think it's really important. People throw the term catfishing around a lot, but this was really serious. What did it do to you when you found out what had happened?
When I found out what happened, I absolutely fell apart. The impact that it had on my life, my work, my career, my family, me, my health. I was a bag of bones by the end of it. The coercive and controlling behaviour had left me doubting myself. Nobody believed me when I came out of it, because you've been made to look mad. That's the perpetrator's intention. Anyone in a coercive and controlling relationship will tell you that. That's the perpetrator's intention, is to make you look crazy while they look sane.
And you had the added complication of essentially being scammed. And when you went to the police, they said no criminal offence had taken place because catfishing isn't illegal in the UK. There's no specific law against it. It's not a specific criminal offence, but there are a number of different laws that can be used, for example, but obviously that's up to you to then know the law, or the police to know what they can do. What kind of response did you get from the authorities when you went to them with your story?
That I wasn't the victim. The real Bobby was, who had no idea what happened to him. It took me 4 days to get a crime reference. It was extremely crude, the way I had to describe give examples to a female officer who then finally understood. But even then, after that, it was such a complex case, and I was pushing, I was helping. I got silence back. I got absolute silence back, and I had to put in a complaint and push for that. And eventually, after the podcast came out, the case has been reopened. We're waiting for an outcome on that, really.
What happened to the perpetrator, the person that did this to you?
Well, I had a civil case while I was trying to chase the police case because I was suffering in silence. Everyone was like, just move on, it's okay, you know, don't talk about it. But I'm the one that has to put food on my, food on my table, roof over my head. Who's doing that for me? I did very quickly rush to get things done and try to date and try to do everything. But you suddenly realise that your world comes crashing down when you realise that all the doors are shut because of what happened and you can't talk about it.
What do you want to change? Because obviously there was a lot of shame put on you for falling for this, and also your treatment by the authorities in something has happened to you. You know something has happened to you and you know it's not right, but there's no law for you to label it with. What do you want to change?
I think there's a lot of things, well, 4 things that I focus on to say that need to change for us to all feel comfortable as victims or in society in general, to feel safe. Firstly being sort of how we police, policing in the law, the legal system, the justice system. Secondly, the internet, all the institutions that look after online, and that includes things like the government, but also institutions like Meta. They have your data, they know what's going on, especially when you're complaining, they know what's going on. They should be speaking up, speaking out, not just closing things down when you complain. Coercive control, understand what coercive control is and that it can happen online. And then there's issues around different minority communities. For me, being of a minority community, we have our own systems, our own culture, our own culture that we have, our own sort of the way we do things, the way we understand things. And every minority and people, victims from other minorities, have also come to me, and wider society doesn't understand we might make decisions made on those things. And society, minorities often are fearful of outing somebody in their own community because the whole community gets tarnished with that brush, and that's not right.
Well, look, if you don't want to know, how this documentary ends, I have to be careful here because, I remember in the podcast it was revealed quite early on who it is. Cover your ears now. But it actually ended up being a female relative that had done this to you for 9 years. Look, Kira, thank you so much for talking to us. The subject of catfishing and what you went through will now be back in the spotlight because of this documentary, and hopefully you get some movement on some of those things you're fighting for, because I appreciate what you went through for nearly a decade was very destructive and traumatic for you. So thank you so much for coming in to talk to us about it. It really is an incredible story. Let's just bring you a statement we've had from Kirat's relative. They declined to be interviewed for the Netflix film, but her representatives told the documentary producers this matter involves events that began when she was a schoolgirl. She considers it a private matter and strongly objects to what she describes as numerous unfounded and damaging accusations. Coming up after the break on the UK Tonight, the Three Lions have their man, but can Thomas Tuchel really end England's wait for the World Cup? We'll bring you all the details from the press conference earlier today.
Trust in politics is at an all-time low. What's going wrong and can we fix it? It's from Liz. She wants to know, why is there still no sign of the Labour Party electing a woman as leader?
It's sort of embarrassing. It takes a very strong man to be leader, but it takes an even stronger man to support a woman for leader.
If you want to be mean to politicians, crack on. The activists that go out and make elections happen, I kind of feel just don't be horrible to them. Be polite to them in the same way that they're polite to you.
Keir Starmer has got us into government with a big majority. He was completely clear before the election that he wasn't going to be able to do the two-child benefit policy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't an early thing that comes along.
I went up to Gordon Brown and said, hello. No, yes, where is it? I said, found all these Tory candidates breaking land. Let me see it. This is brilliant.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Now, he may have apologised for having a German passport, but Thomas Tuchel's tongue was firmly in his cheek as he faced questions from the media for the first time following his appointment as England's new head coach. Among the questions, whether he'll be accepted by the fans and if he'll sing the national anthem. But the former Chelsea manager has no doubt he is the right man to end the Three Lions' near 6-decade wait to win another World Cup. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris was at Wembley for the start of Tuchel time.
This was once unimaginable. A German flaunting an England shirt on the Wembley pitch. Thomas Tuchel doesn't want to be defined by his nationality. Feeling as proud and privileged as any English manager, being entrusted with one of the biggest jobs in football.
Welcome to Wembley Stadium for this unveiling of our new England senior men's head coach, Thomas Tuchel.
But one bringing an often unforgiving spotlight.
I'm sorry, I just have a German passport.
Some aghast the FA went overseas for a men's manager for the third time.
Do you fear that if there are challenging moments, there'll be extra pressure on you because you're not English? And were you shocked by the reaction? Some of the headlines say it's a dark day for English football because you are a German with the Three Lions job.
Everyone has a right to have its own opinion, but I have a little bit of history in English football. I will show fullest respect to my role, to the anthem and of course to the country. I will try to focus on football and win our supporters over with our team.
Are you now going to put yourself in an English mindset, feel patriotic? And
that's very easy. That's very easy. I loved living in England, and I'm excited to be back. I have only good memories, and I want to add some more.
This Champions League and Club World Cup winner with Chelsea back here with a clear mission, ending 58 years of hurt for the Three Lions. Despite reaching 2 Euros finals under Gareth Southgate, fans divided in Tuchel's adopted and native homelands.
I think the mentality here should be trying to get results. Obviously, ideally, we'd look for someone, a homegrown talent.
What opinion do you have for a national trainer? I don't know. Do you know have you anyone in England for a national trainer? Another name?
I think it's a good move. I think at the end of the day, Tuchel has proven he's done well. I think it's going to be a good move.
A German New England coach. So what? It's over 70 years ago, and let's try.
His track record's not that good. Every job he's had, he's been sacked. So I've not got a lot of confidence in him at the moment.
Are you going to start learning the national anthem?
I will absolutely start learning it, but I haven't taken my decision yet if I will sing it or not. I have a bit of time for that, and even with the decision, I don't want to offend people.
Even for English managers of England, facing hostility and hysteria comes with the territory. But the FA insists being a trophy winner with English, German and French clubs made Thomas Tuchel the outstanding candidate. Now he has to prove it by winning the 2026 World Cup. Rob Harris, Sky News, Wembley.
Well, Teddy's here with me in the studio, and Tommy Tuchel, as we now call him on the UK Tonight, thanks to Harry Redknapp last night. I think he seemed to win a few people over this afternoon, very self-deprecating, answering all the difficult questions up front.
Yeah, he seemed to anticipate all the stuff there that in Rob's report about the nationality aspect. He even said sorry to those people who wanted an English head coach. It's interesting, he's not sure about whether he wants to sing the national anthem or not. I think what was interesting as well, in terms of self-deprecating, he said about the 18-month contract, he was asked about that and was very honest in saying, yeah, I've got a lot of experience in 18-month jobs, unfortunately. And he said, I'm hoping to work on being a longer-term kind of guy. So he acknowledged the fact that he's had some combustible moments in club football. He hasn't lasted there a long time. But he also referenced things that he thinks can help, his winning experience. He mentioned the Champions League win with Chelsea when he took over in the new year, and then within a few months led them to the biggest honour in club football, improving what he'd nearly done with Paris Saint-Germain the year before. He said that could be relevant. And he was also very honest about not knowing, actually, whether this is going to suit him, because he's a very intense guy, day-to-day work, whether he'll be able to translate that. Probably in a World Cup, it'll probably work well when it's day in, day out, but for the next 18 months, the build-up. So very interesting and very candid from Thomas Tuchel. He's here to stay for at least 18 months anyway. That's the England picture. Let's speak in a moment about a France legend who's back playing, Paul Pogba, in just a second.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
So Gunther, new book, Gunther Steiner, Unfiltered. So I brought the swear box along, just in case.
Have you got some money? Or would like to put the money
Not much. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I did go to the end. At the end, you detail the phone conversation with Gene Haas, where he explains he's not renewing your contract. Now, that happens after a row between the two of you. Had you been more of a yes man, might you still have been in the job now?
Yes, for sure. If I would have just been always, yes, let's do this, let's not do this. But I couldn't see where the team is going by where he wanted to go. And that frustrated me, you know. So obviously, if I would have said yes to everything, I would be still there and be unhappy. So I'm gone now, but I'm happy.
In a way, you were at loggerheads. It
exactly,
makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
There's been some litigation. There's probably not a lot you can say about that. But what about your relationship? Is there one anymore? You and Gene?
Oh, you know the answer. There is not a relationship. No. Because people ask, what is the relationship? There is none, you know. Yeah. So that's the easiest answer, you know. So obviously, I don't want to get into my court case, but they sued me for the first book.
That's been dismissed.
That has been dismissed. So hopefully it stays dismissed. But you never know.
Had you still been in the job, would you be enjoying the kind of results that the team are getting now? Can you be confident about that?
The car was made last year, and a lot of credit goes there to the team which did it, to Simone Resta, which now is at Mercedes, you know, at the time. I mean, we sat down last year in June and made the decision that the car was born.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
That's all from the UK tonight. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Up next, it's The World. We'll see you tomorrow.